One more presentation, and this is, again, a lesson in spelling, if nothing else. The company's name is Kiip, but it's not spelt like that. And we're going to be hearing from somebody who is reputedly one of the leading 30 entrepreneurs under the age of 30. He's going to present, you see, I told you it wasn't spelt like that. He's going to present on global lessons for a mobile region. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brian Wong. This isn't yours, by the way, is it?
No, it isn't.
Okay, then I'll keep it.
Hello, everybody. Hello. How's it going? Good afternoon. Yes, you're stoked. Yeah, and I'm between you and booze and the gala, so let's get going. So I'm really excited to be here today. I actually came in all the way from San Francisco, so that was about 18 hours of no one bothering me, and so I could just pass out and sleep, which is amazing. I'm here today actually to share about a bit of the founding story of Kiip, some of the principles that guide what we do today, and to share hopefully something that we can all take away as an actionable item around really how this industry can evolve and sort of what the next big opportunities are. Now you're probably wondering why there's a 12-year-old Asian guy on stage talking about mobile. I can explain. Again, a lot of us Asians here do look like we're 12, so I'm kind of among my people, so this is great. But I grew up, I'm 23 now, I'm kind of old, grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I'm Canadian, yeah, go Canada, woo! And moved down to, so I skipped 4 grades in elementary school and high school, and I graduated college at the age of 18, and I moved down to San Francisco to work at a company some of you might have heard of called Dig, and that's kind of my first foray into Silicon Valley, and I ended up actually getting laid off, and that's how I started my company. But this is actually a picture of Counter-Strike, which was a big part of my childhood, which was last year. And for those of you who actually do recognize this, you are my heroes. But gaming was a big part of my upbringing and served as a core platform to how Kiip ended up evolving. Another formative experience in my upbringing happens to be this school. So believe it or not, I actually did a semester abroad at NUS, NUS Business. And this was before the train was built to the hospital, so we had to take the bus to Clementi and take the train. And then we were obviously a lot less exciting than the SMU kids. But it was a lot, I know. And I was like, oh, I picked the wrong school to go on exchange at. I'm kidding. But nevertheless, had a lot of fun and learned a lot about the region. So it's really exciting to be back, and I really love Singapore as well. My entrepreneurial career actually started off with this. Now, I know it's pretty hard to believe. I used to play ice hockey. I know, I used to be really buff. I know. And I actually was involved in and I was the guy who's always like dodging hits. But unfortunately, there was this one hit when I was 16 that I didn't dodge. And it was a knee-on-knee hit. And I actually fractured my lower femur. This is a bone that you're not supposed to break. And it was pretty bad. I was in a wheelchair for a few months. And so you kind of have 2 choices when you're immobile. You either play a lot of games or you start a company. So I decided to start a company. And so I decided to do a web design company with a buddy of mine. I actually learned how to design when I was much younger. At the age of 11, I had pirated Photoshop, because you can't afford Photoshop when you're 11 years old. But that's kind of how I learned how to design. Now, as I kind of hinted before, I got laid off from Dig. I found myself on so this was, by the way, 5 months into a full-time job at the age of 19. Not really something that I wish upon my worst enemy, but I got laid off. And I found myself on a plane much like this one, and I ended up walking up and down the aisles. I call it the aisle creep, and I'm sure you guys do this all the time. You look to your left, look to your right, and you're like, what are people doing? And I noticed that everyone that was on their phones was playing games or pretending to work, right? And I was like, this is really interesting. I wonder why people are so addicted to these mobile games. And so it started to hit me. I started to dissect and realize that there's these things, these achievement moments that people were leveling up, hitting a high score. They had this dopamine rush. It felt good. But unfortunately, in these moments, there was a lot of abuse occurring, right? I'm sure we've all experienced this, right? It was, I'm happy, and then I get slapped in the face with an ad. And I said, well, this is kind of unfortunate. Why can't we take a moment when someone's already happy and actually augment it, right? And make it better rather than turn it the other way. So thus the idea for Kiip was born was, why don't we take these moments when people are happy and actually acknowledge and reward in those moments and bring a brand in to do that. Now, there's one thing I remembered in consumer behavior class. It was that if you tie happiness to a brand, it could be very, very powerful. So I said, what if we could combine those two? Now, what if we did it with apps that weren't ours, but games that were already very popular? So if we could tap into those in a platform approach, that could be really interesting. And at the time, I was also reading a book called Predictably Irrational. And there's a section in the book that talks about this notion of positive intermittent reinforcement. And that's essentially, in other words, surprise and delight. And so I said, well, why not make every single potential reward in this moment surprise and delight, serendipitous, so that people aren't expecting it, it's more organic. So that's how Kiip was born. So we've evolved. So again, in the beginning was, okay, gaming moments, you level up and get a high score, and in that moment, you could potentially be rewarded by a brand. But we kind of used that as a tip of the iceberg and realized that there were so many other moments that consumers were living daily. So imagine and again, these are in apps. And so imagine in a fitness app, when someone logs a run, that's a moment, And let's say you're in a to-do list app and you cross off a to-do or you start a new to-do list. These are all moments, right? Let's say you're a music app, you favorite a song. All these things are moments. So again, this epiphany hit was like, there's so many moments again throughout consumers' daily lives. And our purpose now is to connect those moments to something rewarding from brands. So our mission is to own every single achievement moment on the planet. I know this sounds kind of diabolical, but the whole point was, how do we take when we know something meaningful is happening and do something great with it? And so this is some of the scale we've grown to so far. 3,300 apps now that use our code, that identify moments, and we're able to tap into those moments. So that's a map of the US, I realize it, but I kind of did some digging and realized, and this is obviously way before I even made the decision to come to Asia, was there's a lot of dormant moments that we haven't tapped into yet in this region. And again, think about moments as completely brand new concept of someone actually doing something in that real-time moment, and that being a new excuse, essentially a new trigger that we could potentially respond to as brands. And it became very apparent that this was very exciting. You can tell for China, man, these guys have a lot of moments per unique devices. So there's a lot of activity. They're like, that's definitely out of proportion. I'm going to show you this quick video. We fundamentally believe that in mobile, it's really a series of moments. You evoke your phone in a moment of need. So if you're hungry, you're gonna take out your food ordering app. If you're bored, you're gonna load your game. If you're feeling productive, you're gonna load your productivity app. For us, moments became very important very quickly because we realized that it was almost a currency that indicated hyper-engagement. You're really with someone when they're in a moment where they're feeling something. And so this would be for a game, leveling up or having a high score, or in a fitness app and logging a run and counting calories. We looked at to-dos and productivity and found that finishing a to-do was something that people found a lot of delight doing as well. And so we began to see these moments pretty much everywhere. So whether it be gaming moments, fitness moments, music moments, productivity moments, dinner moments, food moments, you name it, we wanted to create that connection with the consumer and the brand in moments that matter to them. You only have a limited amount of time as a brand to be a part of someone's life. Now you're there when something meaningful is happening. And that is the best, most efficient way to be there while respecting the consumer. So I wanted to show you this so you could see a bit of the motion behind the product, that we wanted to make it feel and look different and also have a little bit of a soundtrack that would make you tear up a bit. So if you look at the way we see our strategy, and this is again, totally something you can steal. It's really simple. It's just the idea that the day part, again, we're all familiar as marketers, but as you go down, the apps you use represent these moments throughout the day. You're not going to be spending all your time on one thing. There's going to be various things throughout the day they're going to do, and they're daily moments. And your home screen is usually representative of this. So really owning that home screen, being part of at least one of those every day, became an obsession of ours. So here's some examples. Let's say you're eating, or sorry, I already gave away. You're finishing a to-do around lunchtime, and it's like around, time to go eat. And in that moment, McDonald's is there. Hey, hey, serendipitously. Again, you never expected this. Here's a reward from McDonald's. In this particular case, the copy goes, ears get hungry too. Feed them with a free song download. So the idea was not necessarily about just the burger, but it was about getting something in their head about the fact that they would probably want to eat a burger. And a lot of it was to do with content, and they chose music in this case. And you claim it to your email, which is part of the user flow. And let's say you're in a recipe app, and you favorited a healthy recipe like quinoa or some shit. And in that moment, Kraft is like, I want to reward you with something delicious, something healthy, and here's a reward there. And you claim it to your email. And let's say you're in a fitness app, and again, this is logging a run or doing something meaningful. And in this case, Walgreens wants to be there when you're happy and healthy. Very American, but I'll show you the Singaporean examples in a second. You claim it to your email. Same deal. In gaming, we also did a thing where it wasn't necessarily about the physical product from the brand, but from something from the game itself. So there's a licorice candy called Red Vines that rewarded not their product, but rather the currency from within the game. And again, the consumer never expects this, and they claim it to their email. You'll notice the email flow. Reason why we did that is because we didn't want people to leave the app and go through a redemption flow in the moment. They are usually doing something that's intentional. And so if we let them go ahead and address it when they have time, which is usually something saved in their email, it's a great thing. So we've recently started working with some e-commerce companies in the region. Zalora's one. They were able to target when you were finishing off shopping list items, when you were in a beauty app called Perfect 365, and a few others. And this very popular e-commerce site, apparently in Thailand for electronics, we're also working with Lazada. Which is amazing, which I think, when you look at the different opportunities, when you see the rewards that come from moments that are, again, universal across 22 languages now, we're able to see some pretty amazing things. One of my favorite examples, actually, is when we were able to find when people were, and this is kind of inappropriate for Singapore, because what would happen is you favorited a recipe that had garlic in it, and you get a free pack of gum, which you don't get here, unfortunately. But it's kind of clever for those of you who actually chew gum. So, why moments? Right? We realized that, again, this obsession with this new currency, moments as a currency, if you think about it, it's quantifiable, right? But it's inherently human, which is what makes it so unique about addressing what mobile engagement really means. And we don't call it real-time marketing anymore. We call it real-time needs addressing. Right? Because if you think about it, the phone is the most representative need states, and need states in real time. And if you're able to tap into those, that becomes real-time needs addressing. And of course, Twitter was just on the stage of, there's a recognition across many larger companies now that moments truly do matter, and moments can indeed be this currency that we use to measure, again, potential opportunities to engage. Google's got their hand on this too. They not only look at it from, sort of the moment standpoint, but their whole business is built on intent. Now, if you think about it though, even now, when we have to go into the search engine and type in something to query it, it's kind of old. Right? So it's kind of an old concept. So now it's kind of predicting your needs before you even know you need it. So Android Wear is a wearable OS they recently launched, and obviously using the biometric signals that come from that, and of course Apple's getting in on the game. You now have additional data that becomes very valuable in predicting those needs before you need it. Now, talk about moments. There's actually explicitly in WeChat, which is a very popular chat app in the region, as all of you know. There's literally a whole section called Moments. Now, again, there's so much about this. Research firms, when Forrester's in on this shit, something, you're onto something, right? So you want to win in your customer's moment. Again, this is all journey mapping. Now, I also like to describe that we're the instant generation. Now, I'm not trying to say this is something that's exclusive to a certain age. So I'm not being ageist or generationist. Everyone here in the room, to me, is the same age. And the reason is because we're all the connected generation. We all have these things in our pockets, which means that we also have this, we're spoiled. We kind of want things now. So how many of you have, and I'm assuming those who are in regions that have had multiple, transportation options available to them. In the US, you have Uber and Lyft are the two main rivals. If Lyft takes more than 5 minutes, you're like, I'm going to Uber. If Uber takes more than 5 minutes, I'm going to Lyft. So we're very spoiled. And these other services are basically helping provide instant on-demand delivery of groceries and other things that you just need and with the tap of a finger. So one thing we learned, though, wasn't just about the reward at the moment. It was about this acknowledgement. The consumer doesn't expect the brand to necessarily care in these very deeply personal, intimate moments. And so one thing a friend of mine actually, she was training for a marathon and she posted a photo of her running on Instagram, and then Nike's official Instagram account liked her photo and she freaked out, right? And the whole point was just the fact that Nike was representative of sort of this pinnacle of sort of fit and was able to acknowledge her in that moment was, again, just enough. So the acknowledgement sometimes is more than just enough. And So when we look at the moment as sort of this atom, there's so many other pieces that begin to evolve. Media is just the tip of the iceberg. The ability to convert someone in that moment in time, and I'll show you about what that looks like in a second, create loyalty, right? Consumers are less loyal to the brands nowadays. They're more loyal to loyalty in general. So if you're able to show that you care in these periods of time that you know that they really only have that attention available to you, you begin to create some very magical, meaningful connections. There's additional data you wouldn't have otherwise been able to glean that you can now take from real-time behavior that comes from the mobile device. And it's also about this combination of multiple categories. Unfortunately, with a lot of the clients that we work with sometimes, there's these silos of folks that are working with advertising, promotion, CRM, and data. But now when you're looking at, for example, when the first impression, when someone has to put in their email address to claim a reward, that becomes a CRM moment. Right? And that kind of looks at and then the fact that it's a coupon or a voucher potentially means that there's a shopper or a promo element behind it. So the kind of taking things and putting them together was kind of what ended up happening when we put this all out there and turned a few things live. Now, when you look at the way that, obviously anything sexy in Silicon Valley has to have the graph word behind it. So the moments graph, we said, hey, there's going to be different overlapping behaviors now. So you look at someone who traveled in a travel app, and you look at someone who at the same time went and now used their to-do list, and they're on the go, and they're checking their finances. That's a profile. That's a persona. Right? And so we began to really accumulate all this. We now have 10 moments personas, almost 30 million unique email addresses and device IDs. So there's a lot of first-party data now that we realize can come from looking at when someone is, again, caring about what's happening in that moment and acknowledging it through an engagement-based model. And so we again, design these personas just looking at overlapping details of someone who's, let's say a fitness fanatic and is working out on an app like Runkeeper, but then we found them on a game later on in the evening. They're still someone who's fit, but it doesn't mean that just because they were in the game, they're now all of a sudden a demographic that's lazy. So you have to realize that there's this overlapping dynamic that we're now able to see and glean from this real-time behavior tracking that comes from looking at moments within these apps. I think another thing that we have to look at as a group is about the notion of permission and inventing new permissions. Now, we've all kind of been operating on permissions that were created like 100 years ago, right? Like I'm going to go and read a newspaper, and I'm expecting to see ads there, and it's content, so I know there's going to be ads potentially that are relevant to that content. And watching television show, there's going to be a nice natural pause, and an ad is going to appear. But unfortunately on digital, that permission is now rapidly disappearing. And this comes in the form of ad blockers, and we're all very well aware of this. And so our challenge was, how do we invent a new permission? And a new permission that we have attempted to invent and have introduced to the ecosystem is the notion of congratulations. And I encourage all of you to try to do something similar. Try to invent a new, and by what I mean by congratulations is if I'm congratulating you for something and I'm going, hey, congratulations, it's not like you're Brian, stop congratulating. You let me finish. And so the whole natural human dynamic of that congratulations being a complete way to acknowledge someone becomes quite powerful. We also wanted to measure emotional value. So we actually looked at, okay, how do we look at biometrics? If the whole hypothesis is in this moment people are happy and we can help augment that happiness, what does that actually look like tangibly? So we actually took a bunch of people, put them into a lab, put a bracelet on them that could measure their skin perspiration levels and pulse levels, and then like a software that could acknowledge facial expressions. And we could see between traditional ads that are the banners and full page ads and a reward, there's a very different electrodermal reaction. And this was essentially excitement levels, people who are anticipating and excited about and ultimately engaging. We even took it a step further and looked at the real-time play of people using an app, which you can see their excitement levels are below the number line. They get the moment, and then they get rewarded, and then they're actually, their happiness levels are sustained. Now, that basically shows and proves that with the reward in that moment, we were able to sustain that level of happiness, which is really, really cool to see. One more thing that I wanted to make very apparent for all of us is that, this is a hunch that we all kind of have, but we were able to measure this, which was the laws of physics on mobile are very different than the laws of physics on our desktop advertising, for example. And even in out-of-home and traditional. Reach and frequency, again, works very well with those traditional models. I'm driving down a highway and I see a billboard 3 times. I will recall the brand I'm most likely going to choose or buy or consider it. Now on mobile, the more often I see a brand, the more pissed off I might actually be. And so that's the different laws of physics that we actually saw, that with both increasing in impressions, both rewards and ads, there's going to be a point where the favorability begins to decline with normal advertising, and with the rewards it continues to soar. And you start to see, when you look at moments of happiness, some astronomical numbers. So that 1,300% lift is not a typo. So the future of moments, I'm super excited about it. And by the way, I mean future, I mean like now, right? So like so we have realized that we're essentially kind of trying to create a new space. A lot of new permissions invented, things like that I mentioned. These are some of the things that we've done. We've taken it to another level where, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, in the moment now, we actually integrated Apple Pay. So if you think about this, you're literally taking impulse buying to another level. So you're going, Brian, but wait a second. You're about rewarding people, but now you have them buying something in the moment. But what we're essentially trying to do is add value in the moment. And some of that sometimes means convenience. Like we put this diapers reward in a new mom app. And the last thing you want to do as a new mom is to worry about refilling on diapers, and so you can literally buy it with one tap. And by the way, logistically, putting Apple Pay in units is not easy. We have 3,300 apps, so we essentially had to apply for 3,300 merchant IDs. So it's not exactly easy, but there's a lot of really cool things you can do when, again, you take that concept of the moment and you extrapolate it. The next stage of this, though, is what we call this thing of connected moments. Now, yes, I'm about to dive into connected devices, but you have to realize that as we see a world of more connected devices, and I'm sure some of you may have seen all the cool gadgetry that came out from CES, and even the things that are actually real today, whether it be your Nest, right, whether it be your connected watch or your wearable, it's very simple. Let me boil it down for all the marketers in the room. As more and more of these inanimate devices become connected, we see more and more real-time data points related to someone's need states. And we have a duty, we have a responsibility as a marketer to not just advertise in that moment, but to actually to address that need, because now we know those things because it's connected. It's happening in real time. So now it's not aggregate data after the fact, it's knowing it when it happens. And what I mean by that is when I'm tired, for example. We will now know as marketers eventually. I mean, this is all coming, right? And when you're about to run out of gas. And so let me show you this quick video.
So the future of Kiip is really looking at moments that actually exist in connected devices. It just so happens that the smartphone is the world's most popular connected device, but there will soon be other connected devices that will gain popularity, whether it be a car that's getting connected, or your connected thermostat, or your connected fridge. These are all moments that we can now use and be able to reward as well. So the moment you know that you hit your energy consumption savings goal, or your fridge tells you that your vegetables are about to go rotten, or your light bulb needs changing, or your car is running out of gas, these are all moments that you will know in real time and that we can respond to. So really, Kiip's vision was always about adding value to moments throughout consumers' days. And we realized that these moments can come from any device, and that the phone was the first connect device, but there are many more to come after that.
So now all of a sudden it's like, wow, like moments are like everywhere. So anything that gets connected is going to emit moments. And that's what's so exciting, because there are people that are now taking this experiment to another level. Have you guys heard of this guy before, the world's most connected man? Apparently he has something from, and it ranges between 300 to 500 sensors on him at any given moment. And he uses it to measure everything from blood sugar levels to how obviously his heart rate and various biometrics. And the interesting thing is this stuff is going to come. And we already now are going to see this future in just a little over a few weeks with the Apple Watch. That now we're all going to see our biometric signals, and those are going to be something that we can respond to and apps can use. When you see the evolution of moment sources, I'm showing you that it started with apps and smartphones, which is where we began. And it went into social media, which social media is very representative of moments. That's why Twitter uses the word moments all the time. Wearables, and then the connected car and the connected home. And this is all about the adoption curve. But biometrics becomes very exciting because you now have a combination of everything that, again, represents the need state, right? This was the holy grail as a marketer, right? This moment of truth, right? It comes from knowing that someone actually has this need and being able to address it. And it sometimes doesn't matter about whether or not you're targeting a demographic anymore. It's actually targeting a mindset and targeting a need state. And that is very much so here today. And it is very real. And so whether it be your watch, you just worked out and here's a reward that's music, or your connected dog collar gets you free dog food, or if your connected bra with working out leads to healthier protein shakes or drinks that can be promoted as well. This is all very personal and very much so leveraging, again, on the wearables category. And we actually collaborated with Jawbone, and we created something called Kiip, get it? And the idea was, yeah, I really love puns. The idea was, how do we use this combination of the wearable activity from your jawbone up and then connect it to potential acknowledgement and rewards? And we actually made it this reality, this car example. So I have the device here. So Mojio is a company out of Canada that you can plug this device into the diagnostics port that your mechanic uses. So any car made after 1993, I believe, and it can make any of these cars connected. And now we can look at moments like when you're about to run out of gas. Now your car will know this before you know it, obviously, and then we could reward. And so we actually partnered up with Exxon, BP, and Shell to reward gas cards before we knew people were going to run out of gas. We also rewarded oil changes to bring people back to OEMs. There are things that, again, you can do so many interesting things with that, again, look at moments. Even we were technically able to see something like someone lingering for more than 10 minutes to find parking, which happens every day in San Francisco. But the idea was, how do we find these moments and, again, add value? That's the core message here. So we realized that it was about not when you look at what we did here, so we actually did a qualitative survey. We asked people to describe rewards and ads. And you can see that the word ads is still the biggest in both categories. So unfortunately, semantics actually still influences the way that the consumer perceives this. The last thing I want is a consumer to go, man, my ads are being shoved on my Apple Watch now. That's our duty here to not make that happen. Because unfortunately, every time a new platform comes out, the linear thinking goes, woo, that's another screen I can put an ad in, which I really hope we just don't do as a group. So collectively, please help make sure that that doesn't become the reality. So we also took the social media moments to the next level. We announced a couple weeks ago with the CMO of MasterCard our partnership that's now powering Priceless Surprises Mobile. So what we're going to do, the gist of it is, and this is coming out April 6th, so keep your eyes peeled. The idea was taking moments when you're tweeting about things like dining and sports and entertainment and serendipitously rewarding you with a priceless reward. So I'll leave you with this as well. I mean, we've all been culprits of this. We've seen this dialogue come before as consumers, not as advertisers. We go, oh yeah, we'll buy this. Isn't it scary that millions of people every single day are paying money to remove us as an industry? And this is a crisis. So I all want us to think about every billions and billions of these impressions, these moments, as an opportunity to delight versus an opportunity to just take advantage of. And I think this is where we have this opportunity to add so much value now with the moments that we see coming from these connected devices. So the question I leave you with is, what's your moment, right? What moment does your brands that you represent own, that your clients own, that you can help serve? And then ultimately, too, the next question is, what moment will then you serve? Because not only now where we know the moment categories, which came from apps, but we now can see things like when someone's sick or when they're reading more than 10 pages and studying like a crazy person, and their heart rate is increasing, or they're frustrated from parking. These are now moments we can now serve. So I really hope we can all do this and serve the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian Wong. Finishing off the Festival of Media on a high note. Do we have any questions, comments? Yes, sir. Get the microphone to you.
First of all, are you on drugs?
No, but I sometimes feel like it because I'm so jet lagged right now. I'm like numb.
Do you drink?
Nope.
Oh.
Well, maybe tonight we'll find out.
I was going to offer to buy you a drink later.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm legal to drink. I'm kidding.
You are in this part of the world.
I am, yeah.
Actually, Jeremy King and I were wondering what was in the milk your mother fed you. Because we'd all like to know how we can get our children to skip 4 grades in school. Do we actually have any genuine questions?
No, I've got a genuine
question. Oh, you do? Right.
I'm only joking now. Yeah, we work in out of home, and you mentioned out of home a couple of times, and we've been thinking a lot about all this moment stuff as well. So just wondered if you'd spent much time thinking about the relevance of out-of-home media and in terms of people's emotions at any point in time of the day, basically.
Yeah, so your question was out-of-home, right? And I think a lot of out-of-home agencies are now recognizing that mobile is part of that. And the initial linear, again, evolution was the whole well, maybe if I use my phone, I'll whip it out near a bus ad, shit will happen. It's like, okay, that's cool. But I encourage you to think about, without that interaction needed, without me needing to point it at an augmented reality thing at a billboard, it doesn't require that. And think about it not requiring that physical connection in order for it to truly be an out-of-home thing. So think about other sensors and now communication methods that could create that reminder. So the Apple Watch has this haptic feedback element now. And imagine you're walking somewhere and it's tapping you to remind you to do whatever. Like, these are things that can start to really cascade into something very interesting. So I do think that out-of-home is going to be a big part of how mobile plays out.
Okay, let's just have 30 seconds of silence so we can digest everything you've just said. Okay, yes, Noor.
Hi, I represent Digital Market Asia. Great presentation as always. This is more of an industry question. 2 years ago, Mondelez had set out 10% of their overall budget, ad budget, just for mobile. But they found it extremely difficult to utilize that budget because there weren't enough ad formats. So of course, Kiip is an exception here. But from what you see of the industry, are you seeing enough examples for a situation that if a client had to do that again, they would actually have enough opportunities to utilize that money and lower the gap between ad spend and consumer behavior?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll try to keep it simple. I think what happens is when you have budget allocated, there's this tendency to either use it for innovative projects, right? Which is what they eventually did some of it with their Mondelez Futures program, what we were part of, and then apply some of it to something that's responsible and transparent, like programmatic, for example, transparent. And then you have direct and sort of traditional spending where you try to partner and sponsor. Anyways, what basically happened with that is because a lot of the experimental campaigns were designed to be one time, they couldn't spend it again, and there wasn't this sort of outlook for making it repeatable, which I encourage us to think about. Like, when you think about an initial experiment, the investment in that experiment should be about something repeatable. The other thing I'll say is, when you look at the traditional formats, make no mistake, like I don't know exact percentage, but a very large portion of mobile advertising dollars that are being counted in statistics are app install ads, right? And I think Facebook has collectively been able to pull a lot of wool over Wall Street's eyes going, well, all of our revenue is mobile advertising. It's not actually the brand's advertising. It's a bunch of apps trying to get installs. And mostly it's gaming. It's things that you just don't necessarily see as being the sexy part of the advertising ecosystem. So all I'm saying is that let's work towards collectively bringing in brand advertising into mobile. And a lot of this includes changing the way that people are incentivized. So our approach in using CPE was just a baby step in saying, hey, let's not incentivize people around reach and frequency. Right? I'll give you a quick example of this. If I were to if people were to pay me on a CPM, I'm basically incentivized to show you the reward as many times as possible without you actually wanting it, right? Because after you claim it, we won't show it to you ever again. So I was trying to explain that when you have the right incentives, you begin to create a more efficient way. And in fact, the net eCPM ends up being higher, but it's much more efficient, right? So those things sometimes it scares people who are very traditional and figured out how to make a reach and frequency low CPM model work in how they were able to reach a big audience.
One final question. Anybody? Yes.
So you mentioned you've got 3,300 apps in your network, and because you're so focused on moments, which I think is great, how do you, number one, in this region, I noticed for Philippines you have 1.4 million unique devices. I'm assuming it's all global at this point of time, and what's the future footprint in terms of getting more local apps into the network?
Yeah, it's a great question. So part of our approach initially was, why don't we take apps that we know have universal appeal that might be language independent, right? So these are games that actually work very well for that, right? And puzzle games and things like that. And then even to-do list apps, because you just have to write things down. So we kind of chose that, and the reason why we had all this traffic is because there's no geographical limitation when you launch an app. Anyone can download it anywhere, and then again, it could be very popular in one region or another. And so that's how we all end up seeing. So what we're figuring out now in our plan in Asia is how do we get sort of strategically brands that have represented our successes in the States, because we work with a lot of the CPGs in the States and retailers in the States already, or sorry, FMCG brands. And the idea was, how do we find those pilots in those regions and then use that to invest in local apps that are relevant? Because most of the time those brands actually already know which local brands that they actually want to go after, and we can even work with them to pursue those and use that as a growth strategy.
All right. We've got to wrap
You
it
can ask
up
me
there
later.
because
Tweet me Brian_Wong. Boom. All right, cool.
because the hotel wants to turn the room
they're
around
gonna-
for tonight's gala dinner.
yeah.
But please join me in thanking Brian
you.
Wong
Thank you very
from
much.
Kiip.